and the components involved in these various verticals, I mean, those become reusable from engagement to engagement with IBM, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So you're gradually developing a library. And what's the scheme? Is it a licensing scheme for those business components? Is that?
Yes. Yeah. So we follow a classical purchase model. The customers license the components. They want us to maintain the code. I mean, there will always be proprietary, unique customer extensions that they want to do and own. And we certainly permit that. We're not trying to take away their intellectual property. However, in most cases, they come to us and say, IBM, we worked on this with you, but now we've decided we want you to keep it and maintain it, because we're going to get time to market advantage. You're going to maintain the technology. We avoid the burden of having to keep it current and up to date. We actually think it'll get better if others adopt it after we adopt it. And so some of the debates that often occur about, well, whose secret sauce is this?
Right.
Sort of go away when you get into the realities of where the benefits are derived.
Right. Well, I want to get a little more into the technology, but also one of the things that you talked about today was the SOA social networking thing, and that's kind of interesting because you're talking about, on one hand, about people are learning these best practices, implementing them in components, implementing them in governance, et cetera, et cetera. Why would I want to share that with others? Because this is really highly competitive stuff. Sure. You're doing this for business competitiveness. Why would I want to share that in a social network with others?
Well, it's like so many things that we see in our world today. It's interesting how the power of community and the affirmation and reaffirmation that comes from community participation has taken on a lot of value. I think what's happening in business is that more value is being placed on speed than whether or not I control it myself. And speed implies openness, standardization. It implies tapping into best practices and knowledge that others have. And if I can move faster in my business, because I've garnered more knowledge, more information by participating in these types of things, people are finding this appealing. It's resonating in a way, frankly, that I haven't seen before. I think there really is a sea change occurring in the way companies are thinking about sharing information.
Give some can you give any specific examples at this point? Or I know initially the trial was in China. Is that correct? And so, what industries were talking to each other in China? That's kind of why did you pick China to begin with?
It was convenient. I have a large laboratory presence there. I have a team of knowledgeable people. Right. There's a lot of interest in China among businesses in China to share information in this space. China is very much focused on speed. You want to talk about a culture that is trying to drive beyond what the G7-based companies have accomplished. It's part of the culture. It's part of the country attitude, and there's an enthusiasm about sharing information in order to rapidly advance business in China. So it was well set in terms of the cultural values. Clearly, what's going on is a lot of techies sharing information.
Right.
There are going to be aspects of business process and how one financial institution does something versus another that they're not going to share. I mean, they're not at that point yet, but they clearly want to share their experience with using core technology. So, I'm using IBM's Enterprise Service Bus technologies. I'm using Process Server. I'm doing modeling and aspects of performance management. And they want to share that information, share best practice, understand what's working, what's not working. By the way, they do see this as a vehicle for driving feedback back at IBM. Some of it is they're trying to motivate us to do the things that they think are most important to do next, and it's part of the interaction process.
So when do you plan to roll it out in the U.S.?
Well, now, this year.
Now?
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, okay. So with second quarter. Yeah.
Can standards ever possibly keep up with what's required for that level of interoperability among systems?
Well, I think that we will, in more sophisticated areas, we will see the standards lag vendor implementations. But as those implementations then mature in the market, the standard will then catch up to the implementation. It's always been hard to standardize quality of service. Function can get standardized, interface can get standardized, but robustness, scalability, reliability, recovery, built-in remediation, there are a lot of sophisticated mechanisms that are extremely hard to standardize. Transaction semantic structures, despite what's happened in the industry around XA interfaces and common structures for message passing and so on. Some of those things have remained elusive in terms of really getting at the quality of service issue. But they're catching up. It's these tough areas in technology will always have that lead lag characteristic.
Right. And I mean, the flip side of that question is a lot of this stuff is kind of getting commoditized. Like, there are a bunch of open source ESBs, not to mention application servers out there. How much room is, above and beyond what open source has now created as, standards-based software, right? Where are the points where companies like IBM can really innovate?
Well, there's always room for innovation, when it comes to high availability, high scalability, high quality of service. So if a problem is very simple, well, then a simple thing will meet the needs and requirements. A small fraction of what is delivered in the sophisticated full function version is probably adequate. We're certainly delivering versions of things that are designed to address that 10% is good enough type of model. We have it in the WebSphere brand, the data management brand. We're doing lots of things with open source. So, we're addressing those market needs at one end, and then we drive the innovation to the upper end. It's the highly scalable transaction processing environments are where we differentiate the technology, and it's where you're going to obviously have premium pricing. By the way, this is not really about open source, it's really about price. And can I get from a vendor that is pursuing a low-end set of capabilities the function I need at the high end? And the answer to that generally is no. The vendors that are focused at the low end really struggle to get to the level of sophistication at the high end. From our perspective, frankly, we've done some acquisitions to try to add that low-end capability rather than dumb down the sophisticated mechanism. Why don't we acquire something that gives us that low entry point?
All right. We've got time for just one more brief question, and that is, what do you think the tech press is not covering about SOA that it should be covering?
Well, at this conference, we're putting a lot of focus on the scalability, robustness. I've been articulating a view that around SOA that says that we have gone through decades of effective vertical automation of business, and we've built very sophisticated transaction systems that support the vertical functions of companies. When we think about SOA, so take it to its end state, where all of the processes now are operating across the business, the applications truly are acting as services to the business process. The horizontal integration infrastructure is going to have to carry a lot of the equivalent burden that the vertical pieces do, meaning transactional integrity, the ability to do classical two-phase commit transaction processing. Certainly the data flows alone will be big enough to demand automation around compensation and remediation, built-in recovery, resynchronization, what about failover? So the richness of function that one might identify in the smaller vertical slices has to show up in the horizontal. And I think that level of dialogue has not been invigorated enough. There's too much talk about, I can invoke a web service, and so I'm doing SOA. And not enough talk about, well, what does it mean to do SOA at scale? That's really the next frontier. And those are some of the biggest grand challenge problems remaining for us in computer science. How do we get a heterogeneous world of many applications working together with transactional integrity, running on different vendor systems, different vintages, make this whole collection of things that we've created work together more effectively and be scalable, robust, and reliable? That is a big problem. It's a problem that the larger businesses are facing, but even smaller companies are going to start to run into this at their particular level of scale.
Right. So being able to handle the mission critical, not just stringing services together.
You got it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve, for talking on this today. It's IBM Senior Vice President of the Software Group, and I'm Eric Knorr, Editor-in-Chief of InfoWorld. Thank you for joining us.